Hey everyone, welcome to Encounters USA. If it's aliens, UFOs, Bigfoot, or dogmen you're looking for, you came to the right place. Now listen up as we listen to some of the latest encounters. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Encounters USA. Well, actually, today we are going to be a little bit different. We're changing from Encounters USA, and we're jumping across the pond. Today, we're going to be Encounters UK as we bring on our special guest, Jackie Tonks. Jackie is a cryptid researcher, and she also does research into the paranormal. And beyond that, I'm going to let her talk about what she does. So, Jackie Tonks, over there in jolly old England, welcome to Encounters USA.
Hello, it's nice to be on. Thank you.
Well, thank you for agreeing to do the show. Now, Jackie, you have a lot of friends as well in the cryptid and the paranormal field, and eventually, hopefully sometime around Halloween, we're going to get you back on, and you're going to do a podcast, hopefully, from one of the oldest bars in England. Is that correct? Oldest haunted bar.
I'd like to try to do that, yes. I drink in one place called the Carrick Martin in Exeter in Devon in England, and it's one of the most haunted pubs in England. So, yeah, I can try that.
Okay. So let's just, Jackie, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in the cryptozoological world.
I'm originally from the centre of the country, the Midlands area of England. I now live in Devon, just outside Exeter. My original background is psychological science, and that sort of influenced my interest in research generally. I now work as a social worker in the National Health Service in England. I've got particular interests. My hobbies are sort of cryptozoology and paranormal investigation. I'm particularly got an interest in Bigfoot. I'm active member of the Centre for Zoology, which is one of the few, if not the only now existing organisation in the world that's dedicated to looking for unknown animals. It's headed by John Downes, who's the director, and Richard Freeman, who's the zoological director. And you might be aware of them from the book Three Men Seeking Monsters by Nick Redfern. They're actually, it's largely a bit of a spoof book. Not all of it's true, but those are the same people that I work with. And I've also done stuff with Adam Davies, Thom Cantrall, Laurie Simmons, and various other people, Toby Johnston, within the Bigfoot world. So, and I try to get over to America as often as I can, so to do Bigfooting.
Well, in those brief few minutes, you gave me so much material. I don't even know if we're going to have time to do it all in 1 hour. Okay, Jackie, so it's really interesting, and I'm so glad you agreed to do the podcast because of your background in the field of psychology. Because, and I'm not trying to make light of anything, but, people that study the cryptozoological world are often referred to psychologists. So it's kind of a funny thing. And I just have to ask you as we begin to start out, let me explain to you, as most of the people who listen to this podcast know, I am by no means an expert in any of this stuff. I've followed it just like everybody else has since I was a kid, and I have a weird way of being able to keep track of things and trying to piece things together. One thing that I'd like to talk to you a little bit about before we get into other things is from a psychological aspect. And now you're on this side of the fence. You're not on the professional, oh, these people are all distracted, they're delusional, they're mistaking whatever they're seeing. Maybe they have a father complex or something. You're not on that side of the fence. You're a professional who's actually out looking for this stuff. So from a psychological perspective, is there a need? Is there a need for something outside of the realm of the possible or the realm of the known? Is there a human need for that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there is, and I think people are always fascinated by mystery. I don't know whether it's a, urge within us to sort of seek new territories. I don't know where that exactly comes from. That's what psychologists would probably say. There's also this sort of friend of mine, Peter Laws, who's written on our fascination with horror and monsters. Recently, a book, The Frighteners. Says that, we seem to have a natural fascination with scary things. That's probably his conclusions. I'm talking to a lot of psychologists, a lot of it's a survival aspect of that, that we're fascinated just to keep ourselves alive. It gets us alert to unusual things or scary things. So I think there is a human need to do that. I've always... since I was a kid, I was fascinated by stories of Livingstone in Africa and all that. And it's sort of, I think all of us have got that. A lot of people in their lives either get fearful of doing that, or their jobs or their family positions stop them doing it. But I think we've all got that urge to go looking for the unknown and to figure things out, really.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Because, I like people that go camping like me, you got to be afraid of the bears and the cougars and, oh yeah. And then maybe there's also these other things out there as well that just aren't as well documented. So yeah, I agree with you that it is kind of a survival thing. And also I agree with you as well that I'm just fascinated by, there's something else out there, but we're not sure what it is. And I just wonder if we came out with a disclosure that everybody's looking for, if people would say, well, now there's something else out there. Now there's fairies and elves and whatnot. And I don't want to get into that discussion today, but I just wonder if these things actually became established as real, that we would start looking for something else. So let me ask you just very quickly then, do you do counseling? Is that your field?
I'm a social worker. I am actually a qualified counsellor as well and therapist. I used to have my own practice, but at the moment I'm a social worker for people with mental health problems. So I sort of assess people, look at the risks for them, arrange sort of accommodation for them if they need it or support. Get involved in mental health assessments if people, don't directly do that, but rather support them with that if they need to go in a hospital and we need to assess, whether they need that. So a lot of different things in my job. It's quite rewarding, but it's very different. But it's interesting, some of my clients have found out and ended up listening to me on the radio, and it's something I have to be really careful with, but I'm quite open about it. And they've asked me, sort of said, oh, you've seen Bigfoot, hang on, sort of feel. And so I've had to be really careful with that. And I've done it in terms of talking to them about evidence and experiment, and observation, and I've found that quite useful for them. Some people have clients have got delusions. They get the visual hallucinations, and I'll say to them, well, how do you test whether what you're seeing is real? And I tell them what I did. And talk about my Bigfoot sighting later, but I get them to sort of think, well, how many witnesses were there? That's more valid if there's more than just you. Can anybody else hear or see this? What were the conditions like? Was it good light? Get them to think about what they're doing, and what they're observing. So I can use it in quite a creative way in my work,
Yeah, that's, I'm very surprised because I thought that the UK would be a little bit more liberal towards this kind of stuff than you might find in the US, where we're so conditioned by, our so-called media. But yeah, that's very interesting, and good for you, and good for you for coming out there and not trying to back off of it, because a lot of people, as we know, in the professional fields would definitely do that. All right, so you have a lot of friends in high places in the Bigfoot world. So can you talk to me a little bit about, and even before we get into that, Jackie, you have Jackie Tonks on Facebook. Do you have a website?
Yeah, sorry, it's Jackie Tonks. Yeah, a bit weird to pronounce. Yes. Anglo-Saxon tongue maker. I've got a Facebook site, Jackie Tonks, 2NKS, and it's under Exeter. I live in Exeter, so that's just my normal Facebook site. But I'm happy for people to contact me on that. Obviously, I always say to people, remain civil, because I know there's us English people find a bit shocked by the Bigfoot world. It can get, people can be quite derogatory towards each other, and that's something, we don't really like. So we say we're fine having conversations, even quite challenging ones, as long as people remain civil.
Well, Jackie, since you're here and you're a psychologist or a person who knows a lot about psychology, can you kind of explain that? What is it that people feel so, I guess, inspired to come on something as, public as Facebook, whatever, and just start, saying these things about a subject that they don't know anything about? Is that normal behavior?
I think you've just summed it up. They don't know anything about it, and I think people are often, a variety of reasons. I think some people are, jealous of other people, that they can actually go out in the field. I think often people are quite scared of their beliefs being challenged. There's a thing called cognitive dissonance where, you've got two opposing beliefs, having to hold that in your head, and some people, can cope with that, some people can't. So the way of feeling comfortable with that is they'll get quite derogatory to the other person and try to belittle them in their own head and directly. So, that's a way of making themselves feel uncomfortable. But I think, we need to be able to hold these two beliefs. We need to be open to the possibility of things.
Is there some kind of social establishing, because we're always trying to establish ourselves in the pecking order of the situation we're in. And I know there should be a lot of studies done on these, but I think that there's a reason why people don't study this behavior. But do you think it kind of falls into the fact that people are trying to establish themselves as somewhat higher in as worthless of a pecking order as a Facebook post might be? Do you think that has something to do with it?
I think that's some of it, but somebody has to assert themselves like that and, assert their dominance. Psychologists would say, has an inferiority complex anyway. They tend to have quite low self-esteem. If somebody's genuinely got high self-esteem, they don't have to do that. I think it's a shame people have to do that. Mm-hmm. But, I often find the people who do make the very derogatory comments are those who wouldn't be confident enough to actually go out in the field and have not. People often say to me, Bigfoot can't exist. Come on, talking rubbish. And I'll say, well, have you actually been up, into the wilderness in North America? Have you seen what it's like? And these people haven't ever been there, and a lot of the people, they're sat in their armchairs, they're not actually doing anything, they've not bothered to speak to people, so I think that those sort of issues are going on,
Yeah. I think that there should be a lot of research done because this social media, it can be dangerous. And, just over time, when I think just there's a psychological effect on people of, constantly getting this negative reinforcement. And the more it seems like it's the people who study like Bigfoot or UFOs, whatever, the more that they try to do it, it's usually out of, 80% of the time it's out of a desire to teach and to share knowledge, right? And so it's a very noble motivation, and the response to that on social media is the worst of human nature sometimes. So yeah, maybe you or somebody over there in England could do something towards that phenomenon. But let's move on then, Jackie. And again, I'm sorry about this Tonk thing. As I think of your name, of course, and the fact that you're from the UK, I keep going back to Honky Tonk.
Honky Tonk woman.
So I'm driving down the road, and so yeah. So anyway, if I do that again, then it's simply because they wrote that. I wonder if they wrote that song about you. I wonder if there was any inspiration there, but we'll just leave that to speculation, unless you know something.
I don't know. I don't think I don't know though.
Okay, because it could have easily, you could have fit Jackie in there, the Jackie Tonk woman, Tonks woman. So anyway, all right. Well, let's leave that alone for right now. As I told you before, English people, especially not British, but English people, don't so much get my jokes. Australians, do, but English people don't. So this might be a long podcast for you. Anyway, Jackie, so let's go on. So you've had experiences in the UK mostly, or mostly in the US?
Bigfoot experiences all in America. Despite what some people say, there are definitely no Bigfoots in England or any wild men left. There might have been in the past. I'm not really now. There could have been things that present like Bigfoots. There could be paranormal entities. We had a lovely example at a conference, Association for Study of Anomalous Phenomena conference I was recently speaking at, where one of the audience said that they'd been debunked a recent so-called Bigfoot sighting. A man said he'd seen, I thought it was a man or a woman, I'm not too sure, said they were walking through a woods and saw a Bigfoot crouching down and having a drink out of a pond. And, they were swore blind that they'd seen this. And it turned out it was actually somebody who'd just been to a fancy dress party, was rather still a little bit recovering from the drink the night before, was rather dehydrated, took a shortcut through a wood, and they said they saw this pond and the water looked drinkable and they're extremely dehydrated. So they're still in their full orangutan outfit. They crouched down with a hand and got a drink of water. Well, anybody seeing this in dim light would have thought, oh my God, it's Bigfoot. So, this was the person said, oh, it was me. So we get this, and we had a lovely one as well near Plymouth in Devon. The police told us about. They found a man in a ditch. This was told to Richard Freeman from Centre for Zoology by the police, that they found a man in a ditch, basically plain sober, tested him, no alcohol, didn't appear to on drugs, and swore a Bigfoot had run in front of his car. So they got the car out of the ditch, and they were very puzzled by this one. And it turned out, they found out a couple of weeks later, they were trying to find, make sense of this. And they found out a couple of weeks later, there'd been a Star Wars convention at the hotel nearby. And a very tall guy, it's Wookiee, isn't it? The thing from Star Wars, the big ape thing. Rather drunk, had staggered across the road. And this is what the guy had seen. So there's often perfectly normal explanations for these things in the UK.
Yeah, that would be, unless the thing was like 10 feet tall, the first thing I would think would be it's probably somebody in a costume, or I'm not seeing this correctly. So that's very interesting. But Jackie, before we jump over here to the U.S., have you had encounters with something other than Bigfoot? And really what I'm looking for is, because we're aliens, Bigfoot, and UFOs, have you had contact with I meant Dogman, Bigfoot, and UFOs and aliens? Have you had any contact with UFOs, aliens, or dogmen over there?
I've also done been out to looking for the Almasty, the Russian Yeti as well. I've done that with cryptozoology, Richard Freeman. Successful with interviewing people and meeting people who'd seen it, but not actually directly myself with encounters. I don't go looking for UFOs. I had one strange encounter about 3-4 years ago. With something I can't explain. I was in Devon in a small village called Chudley Knighton, 4:00 in the morning, woken up by a very strange humming noise, which was actually nearly making me sick and very nauseous. Thought, I've got to find out what's causing this because it was making me feel really unwell. Gone out, walked downstairs, and I see a light by the church. It was very, very misty. There's a church right opposite my cottage I was living in at the time. Walked across and could see a mist and this red light by the church, and the humming was getting louder and louder. And as I stood there, this light shot off, the mist disappeared, and I really don't know what that was, but that was rather strange. That's got me thinking, what was it? Was it a military experiment? I don't know, but it made me feel pretty nauseous and disorientated. So that's the only... As a kid, I saw something that was cigar-shaped in the sky that disappeared. But apart from that, I don't really look into UFOs, but that was a weird experience.
Okay. You just don't look into it because it's just not an interest of yours?
I think I just got so many hobbies and interests that if I did anything else, I was a friend of mine makes telescopes, as into astronomy, and I was stargazing with him. So if I saw something, I'd follow it, obviously. But, it's having the time, really. But, I think there probably is something there. There probably are aliens. But, there's interesting. I was talking to a friend who, an Australian, a white man, and he was talking to the old Aborigines there about memes, which they're like, if you see them in cave paintings, they look very similar to what you call greys over there. And he was talking to the elderly Aborigines, and he said, come on, you know me, stop messing around, I'm not tourist. And they said, honestly, they're exactly what the Americans are talking about. Greys. And another friend of mine, it's quite a famous didgeridoo out there, he said he was in a gully once on this bright light, and these things ran right in front of the car. And he said they're very big heads, very long legs. And they only come out on very clear nights, and when they come down, there's the leaves rustle, which is very interesting, isn't it? So, and that some of those legends are thousands of years old.
So these things, do you know if they're coming in craft or are they from here?
We don't know. I mean, if you get into Aboriginal folklore, if you're a Westerner, it fries your brain. I mean, I do. Another hobby of mine is storytelling. I look at tales throughout the world, and that sometimes can give us a few clues as to mythological stuff and cryptozoological stuff. Is it real? Because some of these tales will give you hints. And I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of animism beliefs. Things can come alive that we would normally see as alive in their culture, but these things, the elderly Aborigines, tell my friend, no, they're what, they're spacemen, so, and you get similar reports. I think, is it the First Nation, is it Zuni legends, or I can't remember, or Hopi legends, isn't it? I think some of the stuff overlaps incredibly with the Aboriginal stuff, so it's quite interesting, really.
So before we go into, I want to talk a little bit about your search for the Yeti, but dogmen in England, does that interest you? Are there a lot of accounts? Because I listen to
we get werewolf reports,
but not werewolf. I'm talking. This is not
like dogmen. Yeah, we don't get dogmen at all in England. We get werewolf reports. Some of them are quite similar to dogmen.
And I think it's just I hate even discussing this, but on the werewolf, the guy changes back, right? It's into a man to wolf. That's a werewolf. But the dog man is full-time and not a dog. And I'm just going to throw this in there. If you've seen any of my podcasts before, I'm pushing to change the Dogman to Wolfen, right? Because he's more of a wolf. Remember your movie from the 80s, Wolfen? Not very popular. Probably not very popular. There was a movie in the 80s called Wolfen. Wolfen, right? And I think we should change Dogman from Dogman to Wolfen. But
is that the one where the policeman is like a werewolf?
I've only seen parts of it. And I just couldn't keep watching it. It just didn't. I mean, I'm sure it's a great movie, but I watched a little bit of it, and I don't think I watched all of it. And there's a funny story that goes with it, but we have used so much time already, I'm not going to go into it. So anyway, that's a kind of a political thing I'm trying to get going in the cryptozoological world to change Dogman over to Wolfen. So that's just a side note.
I think a lot of reports of Dogmen are probably Bigfoot. I think the stuff I've looked into, I think, or a Bigfoot with an elongated snout, like, because you get baboons, don't you? And you get, gorillas and looking, it could be that it's a Bigfoot that's got slightly different features, That's, I don't know.
Well, Jackie, we need to sit down and we need to have a long talk, I see, so I can give you some of my crazy ideas. One of them is that I think that these Dogmen, maybe even the Bigfoot, and all of this is based on the Skinwalker Ranch, right? I'm not just coming up with this. But I think that the Dogman is associated with these portals that I think they move in and out. That's why they're not there all the time. And I think where they're coming from is a time like, back in Ice Age times, back in woolly mammoth times, but they went extinct a long time ago. But at some time in history, they were out there and they're crossing. I think they're just from this planet. I mean, I think they're just crossing a dimension of time. And I think that the Bigfoots might also be doing that because I think that they might be from just like the woolly mammoth time. And that's a crazy idea, but that's just kind of what I think about. Now,
I'm open to both paranormal and cryptozoology stuff. I think Bigfoots, though, I think they're a real animal. They're an animal just like, a gorilla would be, or a hominid, Homo erectus, Neanderthal, whatever it is. I think sometimes that, there is sort of paranormal stuff that's sometimes happens around Bigfoot. I think a lot of it is events that just happen at the same time in the same location, and they often get put together. I think that's my belief. I think with Dogmen, I think there could be some paranormal stuff, and I have, do paranormal research, and I have encountered some paranormal stuff. So, and I've seen, I work with a shaman in Nepal, and I've seen shamans do stuff that would blow most people's brains. They're sort of, so I know there are some amazing things that are beyond science, but I think Bigfoot itself is a known animal or a known hominid. I think it's a real animal, and I think, it can. I'm concerned that, putting a paranormal side on it, can divert from the seriousness of that this could be an endangered animal. That's the only thing that concerns me, really. The fact that people think that they can't shoot it. If it's paranormal, the bullet will go through, and that's what concerns me, really. I mean, I think there are some very weird things that happen around Bigfoot, and I'll be talking on England at a conference about that, and some of these things can't be explained, but my personal belief is it's a flesh and blood animal. Okay. Very special qualities and very clever ones. So, yeah.
Okay. And that's a big part of, Jackie, I've done this podcast. I started at the end of April. I mean, I knew things. I follow things on Bigfoot. More, my forte is probably aliens. I didn't know anything about a Dogman. But I've learned so much just in the 4 months that I've been doing this. And it's not so much about the Bigfoot, which I've learned a lot. It's about the people who study Bigfoot, right? And so it's so much like, and I've talked about this almost ad nauseum, it's so much almost become like a religion where I have my beliefs and you have yours. And at some point, like you and I can sit down and I can say, oh, that makes sense. Yep. What you're saying is right. But other people just get really upset, and it's almost like a Protestant and a Catholic or something. So when we're sitting here talking about Bigfoot, well, everybody has their own idea, right? So you have as many people who believe in Bigfoot. That's how many ideas that you have as to what that thing is. And your point that, because I go around saying, oh, it's well associated with UFOs and whatever. Well, you're probably right that I'm not doing it a very good service, because if I'm convincing people that it has magical properties, then it does take away the credibility of the studies, first of all. And then, like you say, some idiot is going to go out and try to shoot one. So, but those are very, very valid points. Do you have anything you want to add to that before we run over to Russia?
Yeah, I think that, it is a difficult area. I know, I've worked, sort of met people who've got sort of religious beliefs connected with Bigfoot, and, that they're sort of, believing in a flesh and blood hominid Bigfoot. For some people, could be quite threatening, if you hold quite rigid, religious views. Finding a hominid that's living, is going to throw, the whole religion evolution thing, so it's sort of, I think some people, we have to respect, that's the belief they hold, that, that they're accepting Bigfoot's there, but the way they describe it is going to go with their worldview. And some descriptions like, that it's a regressed man, or it's, something from the Bible is going to be more comfortable for them. I believe it is a hominid, and I think we can hold, religious beliefs and evolutionary beliefs together. I don't think they're incompatible at all.
Yeah.
But I think, some people are going to find that quite threatening. There's obviously the issues with the threats to the logging as well, which I know is a very sensitive area. So it's difficult. I think we have to let people believe what they want to believe, but I think we've also got to remember that this, is an animal that might be in need of protection. I don't think we're too sure how many of them there are. I guess there's quite a few of them. But I think we need to be careful about starting to put mythical and paranormal things on it, that it, it might not get the protection it needs if it does need it.
Yeah. And there's one thing, when you're very familiar, I'm sure, with Melba Ketchum's study, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's one thing that I think we are on a collision course with. Are you familiar with the Scopes monkey trial?
I might be. I'm not very good
I would be very impressed if you are, because Americans are not. People don't, unless you live in Tennessee, most people don't know what the Scopes monkey trial is. In 1925, a teacher in Tennessee started teaching evolution, and immediately the school board fired him. And he went to court and he appealed his firing. And what came out of it, but it's the same issue, because he was saying that evolution, that man descended from apes, right? And here you have the evolutionists, who are now the religion, who are saying that there is no Bigfoot. We have all the apes we've got. Man descended from ape, and that we don't, and that thing doesn't exist, right? So science has completely taken the place of organized religion from 1925. And we're closing in on 2025, and we're probably closing in on having some definitive, most people accept Melba's findings as legitimate. So we are actually closing in on that date and on the finding that there is something on the planet that we cannot explain. And that is going to, and I keep comparing Melba to Galileo, because it's going to make us go, oh no, we're not the center of the universe. And there's actually a creature, because in the Bible it says that we would have dominion over animals and plants. Well, that thing would, if it chose to, it would have dominion over us, right? Because it's so much bigger, smarter, and has abilities. So that really screws up that whole thing in Genesis about man having dominion over people. So I mean, that's just a point I would like to make here, because I don't really get to say it that much, because most people would understand what I'm talking about. But that old Scopes monkey trial is going to come right back and fly into everybody's face.
I think a lot of scientists, there are ones that aren't. Sometimes, they've, some people are very threatened by, as I said, new stuff. Some scientists are very, the area they're in is very narrow. But there are scientists like Professor Brian Sykes. I think the book he wrote there is called The Last Neanderthal. In America, it's called The Nature of the Beast in England, but obviously that would have upset a lot of Americans who would have thought it was probably about the devil, so it got renamed the book. But he's the geneticist that discovered the 7 Daughters of Eve geneticist. They discovered we all came from 7 women in Africa. And he was the guy, he came over, he was trying to get DNA evidence of Yetis and Bigfoots. So there are, we've got Jane Goodall, the chimpanzee expert, says she does believe in, that it is out there. We've got lemur expert, I think Salman Mascarin, I think her name is, I think it's Oxford Brooks. I'm just trying to think. Sorry if I'm misquoting her. She's a top lemur expert, and she, her team. I've been speaking to them. They're quite open to it as well. They've been giving me advice about research. We've used as consultants in Redmond, who's Diane Fossey's old assistant, the woman for Gorillas in the Mist. He believes in it. So I think a lot of scientists are open to, a lot of these things. Obviously, people like Grover Krantz, it backfired on them, but, I think scientists are starting to be more open, to things like this.
Well, I want to say this for Grover. He was my neighbor when I was in college. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And just so you understand the sociological aspects of it, I'm in college and I didn't care. I mean, Grover was the Bigfoot guy, and he would take us in. He took us in a couple times to see his collections, and we saw this dusty shop and a bunch of casts and drawings and whatever, and there was nothing impressive. But at the time, and this is back in the 90s, who cared? I mean, okay, so here's your Bigfoot stuff. At the time, I didn't believe I didn't care. I didn't care if there's a Bigfoot. If there is, okay, that's fine, but it wasn't a big deal to anybody. It's just because back then you would have somebody like Grover say there's a Bigfoot, and you'd have 5 people in the media doing stories about how these people are idiots or crazy, right? So there's the constant reinforcement for the crazy side. It doesn't matter. And at least there's more important things in your life than whether or not there's a Bigfoot. But now, I mean, it's in the culture. It's on the media. It's social media. There's so much other media that can give positive reinforcement to the idea of a Bigfoot. And so if you think there's one, and I don't like saying I believe there's one, but if you think there's one, well, then you have a lot of people now telling you that, yeah, you're right, instead of, the media telling you, no, people that believe in that are just crazy.
I mean, having seen Bigfoots, I know they exist, but, I can see, but for, somebody who's never seen one, or I've had other experiences as well with them, I think, you look at objective, there's so much evidence that, what you look at if you're in cryptozoology, you look for consistent descriptions of behaviors, of, appearances. And, you look and there's thousands and thousands of these reports, and there's no people know they can disclose without being ridiculed. You're getting thousands a year. And exactly the same animals being described. There might be a bit of variation in the facial features, a bit of variation in the height, but it's an identical animal every time, and, there's so much evidence that it is there. You don't get that. If somebody, dragons, I mean, my friend Richard Freeman, hopefully you'll be interviewing soon, he will, gives you reports about dragons, and there does seem to be, evidence from years ago they probably did exist, but modern day dragon reports are really inconsistent, that it's a different animal, it's got a dog face, a sort of sheep face, a lizard face. There's so much inconsistency really, which is what you get with an animal that is really, there. It's probably not there anymore, or in the form that we know it as a flying
or hanging out in a bar in the UK. So, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And all right, now that's enough. We have to talk about Russia, and the reason that we're going to talk about Russia is because I have a theory, and I'm going to tell you my theory very quickly. One of the things that has changed is that they have podcasts like mine, Encounters USA. They also have like the Sasquatch Chronicles. They have this Dogman show. I can never remember the name of it, but there's a way that if you have an encounter, you can call somebody, and thousands of people are going to hear that you had an encounter. Right? And there's nobody there saying that these people are crazy or they're insane. And there's one other thing that I want to just throw at you, since you're over there and you probably don't hear a lot of the American rubbish, as you would say. And that is, I keep harping on this concept of there's no credible evidence. And that is what their ultimate goal is in every situation, is just destroy the evidence, destroy the credibility of the evidence, and then there's no credible evidence. So that's why we don't have a Bigfoot encounter, et cetera, et cetera. But the difference totally is just that social media, although it does have negative aspects, it has allowed people like you and I to have a voice where we wouldn't have a voice before.
And I think it can be really positive. I mean, I've chatted to people from all over the world, and like, for instance, Yeti stuff. I went to Nepal, but sadly timed it a bit wrong and ended up in the Nepal earthquake in 2015. And at the time I was collecting evidence on Yetis, and I met people who, I knew people who'd been attacked by them. And I was just about to meet this professor I was talking to a guy in a bookshop. He said, I'm friends with him. And he was just arranging me to meet this guy. And the earthquake hit, so I never got to meet him. But social media has allowed me to chat I've got friends with Sherpas in Nepal. They've been collecting evidence for me. There was a guy in Pakistan. He went to he actually made friends with him. He went to the World Wildlife Fund in Pakistan and asked me whether there'd been any Yeti reports there. And they were actually amazingly open to it. They said, not for about 40 years. So that was amazing that World Wildlife Fund are actually willing to talk about Yetis. So it's really, really useful. I'm able to speak to these people, also in Russia, and talk about, their experiences. So it really is amazing. Yeah, it's really useful.
All right, Jackie. So let's go to Russia. I want to talk about that. That one that they captured a female?
Ozena.
Yeah. Do you know that story?
Yeah. I'm quite interested in that.
Can you tell that story for our listeners?
I think I'm trying to think the exact date. I think it was 1830, 1840, roughly. She was caught by hunters. She was, I think, about 6'8", 6'10". She was very, very tall. Covered from head to foot in hair. Had quite an ape-like human face. She originally when they caught her, she kept trying to bite them, and then they kept her in a cage, and then they tamed her, and they got her doing menial tasks around the farm, like grinding corn, and she was incredibly strong. She could pick up massive big rocks that a human couldn't. And she never ever learned to speak. She would make grunting noises. She would sleep by digging a hole in the ground. And, she behaved, human qualities and ape-like qualities. She would get incredibly drunk. She used to love getting drunk to the point she'd collapse. And the locals, rather sickly for a dare, would have sex with her. It was, one of the laddie things there. And she did get pregnant quite a few times. Initially, the young, she would take them down to the river and wash them, and then they'd just die of hypothermia because they weren't fully Almas or whatever she was. And then the locals would take them off her, and her son quit. He died, I think it was 52, 53. There are photographs of him. His skull has been exhumed, and his mother's skull has never been found. They thought they found it a while back, but it didn't look like hers in the end. But his skull is very thick brow ridge, quite big, heavy jaw. And he used to do things like, he was so strong, and his teeth were abnormally large as well. He could pick somebody, a grown man sitting on a chair, and pick the chair up with his teeth without damaging his teeth. Now, there's no way a human could do that. And I know it's been postulated that Zaina was, she might have had some genetic syndrome, but people with I know from my work, people with those syndromes, they tend to be quite weak. They don't tend to be very strong, and Professor Brian Sykes, I was talking about earlier, in his book, you call it Last Neanderthal in England, it's Nature of the Beast, talks about her, and he's actually done genetic analysis from some of the teeth of the skull, and he's doing retests, but he's now saying that her DNA is over 100,000 years old. She's not human. She was not human, which is absolutely amazing. He's doing retests, but, it looks like, she wasn't human. She was probably pre-human. So it's amazing. And her DNA comes from an area of East Africa, which is quite interesting.
All right. So you know that on Melba Ketchum's study, about the DNA results from that, right?
I'm aware of Sykes' view on that as well. He stated in his book he feels that it was possibly corrupted DNA. It's very, very difficult to take samples without corrupting it with human DNA. Him and a Swiss biologist, I might be misquoting that, have in their book are describing a technique for cleaning it so it doesn't get rid of the contaminated DNA. But his feeling is that it was highly likely contaminated. He did look at Melba's Ketchum's techniques, and he felt, in his book he states it was contaminated. I mean, it might have been, it might not have been. I know the recent presenter who's also, I think he's an ex-vet, has just did a program recently where he went out to Bhutan, and they used environmental DNA. They were looking for the Yeti, and they got a sample there that was incredibly close to human, but they said it wasn't human, but it was incredibly genetically close. So that might, and it had been in an area where Yetis had been spotted and footprints been found. So, that could provide evidence for that. I don't know. It's difficult, really. I've had Brian Sykes describe how to DNA sequence to me on a blackboard once, and it's incredibly complex. Yeah. Great, absolutely lovely bloke. But, it's very complex stuff. So.
Well, the reason that I'm talking about Melba's study, and I thought we'd find some agreement, but now we've actually come to a crossroads, because on Melba's study, from what I understand, is that DNA was 15,000 years old. So there's one discrepancy right there. And in support of Melba's study, they had a lot of samples that came up with the same things. So I don't know, and I certainly don't want to get into it, but there is a difference. That thing that Melba was studying, and there's actually a point to all of this that I'm trying to get to, but it's kind of a long path that we have to go down. So Melba's study was done over 12 labs, whatever, and they came up with this female the mitochondrial DNA was a human female. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, all like the bit that you test is always female mitochondrial DNA. That's the bit that
a human female, not an ape. Yeah. Now, was this? I can't remember the name of the Russian one. Was that also a human? Was that a female? I mean, it had a human female mitochondria.
Psych said his testing so far suggests it's pre-human. It's not human. It might be a very, very early form of human, but it's definitely not a modern human. It's probably, he thinks, pre-human. It's probably a hominid that was just before man. Possibly.
Okay, but so that was a hominid that was just before man.
Yeah.
But man also evolved 100,000 years ago. And I think they pushed it back to 195.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's what he's saying is it's not modern Homo sapien. It's possibly a very, very early form of us, or it's not. It's definitely not matching modern Homo sapiens, do they?
But it seemed to have survived over time with us, right? I mean, there's somewhere out there, wherever it came from, those community, its family is still out there somewhere. I mean, or was at the time that she was captured. I
mean, they're still supposed to be out there. I met,
So now, does she qualify as a Yeti? Is she, or a Bigfoot? Does she qualify? Is she 10 feet tall? And
no, she was about 6'8", 6'10". She was nearly 7 foot, but I mean, they think that the thinking at the moment is Bigfoot and Yeti are more primitive hominids than that. The thing I saw, I would say it looked very close to Homo habilis, something like that, a lot more primitive. I can't say with the Almas. I know some people have said have seen it. I've met people who've seen it. They said it very much looked like Australopithecus, but a lot of these things have probably evolved, so they're not anything like they were. They're not the same hominid. They would have evolved, so, they might not have evolved into a man, but they might be a different type of hominid. And there's loads of hominids. We're finding new ones all the while. Denisovans, we found the hobbit ape, Homo florensis, and we're finding new ones all the while. There's another new one being found recently, so they wouldn't have to fit into what we know. Yeah. There could be completely new ones, and they could have evolved from the ancient ones anyway.
Yeah, keep checking those bars in the UK. I'm telling you, you're gonna come up with something. I'm kidding. All right. So, all right. Now, let me just throw this at you, because this is another one of my ideas. And this Russian thing, doesn't that really say something about Russians? That's like a family secret that they shouldn't let out, that they're the kind of people that would sleep with something that is 7 feet tall and hairy. That's kind of something that if I was Russian, I wouldn't want that out. But anyway, all of that morality aside, and I guess vodka. I mean, get some vodka in you, and some guys will just do anything. So
I think it's a dare, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it must have been a late night at the, I don't know what their bars are called, but must have been some extremely late nights, and all the other ladies must have gone home. So, all right, so let's leave that alone. So let us jump, because we don't have a lot of time, but the whole reason, one of the reasons you're here, and I had no idea you were so exciting to talk to, we need to go back over here. We need to get into our Northwest woods, and we need to start talking about your encounter, first of all, with a Bigfoot. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
And
I've had various
what were you doing here in the first place?
Well, I got involved with the Centre for Fortean Zoology and met Richard Freeman, who's now one of my close friends.
Jackie, can I stop you for a second? Can you say that again? It's the Centre for
Fortean Zoology.
Fortean. Okay. And is there a website for that?
It's World Wide Web, CFZ, and I think it's .org.
World Wide Web CFZ?
Yeah. And I think it's org, rather than co.uk. I think it's org. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to put that on my screen. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. Well, basically, I was at one of the conferences. I met Adam Davies and various of his friends, and they were going Bigfoot. Laurie Simmons had invited them out, so I sort of initially went with them. I recounted the tree that the Bigfoot was allegedly under. I've got various views about that, so I'll talk about it later. I also met at that time Thom Cantrall, and he invited me out again. I think it was the next year or the year. I think it was the next year rather than the year after. But and we went OS Road, which is just outside Orleans, a little sort of fat town village in Northern California. And we were camping right at the end of that. It was never actually finished. So there's sort of there's a nice campsite right at the end of it. It's very difficult to get to, but it was very stunningly beautiful there. And we got there and there was what looked like footprints within 20 minutes. And I thought, "Ooh, this is good," because I had seen footprints as well. The first time I went out with Laurie, we cast some good footprints then, so I knew they existed. I knew what to look for. And then I think it was about 3-4 days in with Tom. We'd just come back from a Willow Creek, place I really wanted to see, being, Bigfoot. And we'd gone to the museum and everything, gone for lunch. And then we were driving back, and it was 20 to 4 in the afternoon. And Tom was driving. I was in the passenger seat. And Arla Collins was in the back. I think I've got a surname right. I never remember surname. But anyway, she was a snoozing in the back. And from a distance, we were just going up a slope, and it's very wide Longing Road, very, and there was all burnt out trees on the right-hand side, and, it's quite a steep slope, the other side with trees. And suddenly from distance, two things ran out, and from a distance, they looked like two men in all-in-one overalls, dark overalls with hood up, running barefoot. And I noticed they had really abnormally wide shoulders, but initially, I knew there was some marijuana growing in the area, and I thought they were drug runners with a very weird outfit. And I thought, well, they must be getting hot in that. And I turned to Tom and I said, "What are those idiots doing? That must be killing their feet on this ground." And he starts chuckling. And he said, "What are you here looking for?" And he said, "You've just seen it." And I thought, what? And suddenly I heard they'd just run across the road, and we thought they'd gone. Suddenly I heard Tom yell. And right in front of the road, in front of the car, is standing these two things a lot closer. And what they'd done is they'd sort of run from the left to the right. They'd run into burnt out trees, panicked because they couldn't get any cover. I'd come back in front of the car. And for about a second and a half, they dithered. They didn't know where to go. So they just stood right in front of the car. And we did an emergency stop. And I think we stopped. I judged we were about 15 feet away. Tom said 20. And for a second and a half, they just dithered. And I'll tell you, but it was like a car accident. Everything was slowed down. And I got, my brain let me get a really good view of them. And my brain was still thinking, "You're not seeing this. You're not seeing this. They're them weird men in suits." Like, your brain just can't perceive what's seeing, really. And I could see what looked like, if you do fiberglass work on a car or a boat, it's before it's smoothed off, you get that sort of hair type look. It was like unworked fiberglass. It was hair, not fur. It was quite a bit matted in areas, and they were like, I think a dark grey, but it was very dusty, so they could have been black with dust on them. And their faces, I remember looking at their shoulders. Their shoulders were abnormally large, about 3.5 feet across. But their faces are the bit I remember. And I remember they got quite a flattened nose. It was like a human nose, but quite flattened, quite big. Quite a long jaw. The brow ridge was quite large, and their eyes were quite sunken, but they were a lot bigger than a human's. And I couldn't see any white at all. They were very dark eyes, there's sort of, those things, what's those things you'd say, the children with the strange dark eyes, they were a bit like that, the eyes, they were quite scary eyes. I'm not saying they're paranormal or scariness, and it's just, they had no white. And that is meant to be, having no white is meant to be a more primitive trait for primates. It was a later adaptation, the white in the eye, to aid communication, so people could see where people's eyes were going. So that says something perhaps about them. And they had like a domed head. It was like a melon-type head. I don't know whether it was sagittal crest, like a gorilla. I didn't have a chance to look. But I just won't ever forget that face. It's like, I remember it like a car accident. It was just like freakiest thing, just having them look at us. And I know they were definitely not man in the monkey suit. They were far too detailed. They were acting like animals. They were very skittish, like a scared deer would be, trying to get away from the car. And I can actually see some of the facial muscles twitching. They were so close. And they, you get a monkey suit, you might get a slight sort of bit of movement, but these are fine muscles you could see moving. So unless, at the time I thought my friend set me up, but I know Tom and his friends haven't got that sort of money, and that would be better than Hollywood could have provided, It would have cost you millions to even recreate that, and I don't think you could. They can only do it with computer graphics. So, I believe what I saw was genuine. My brain wouldn't let me see it for days. I kept convincing myself they were really ugly guys, And I kept going, I'm sure they were just regular guys. And my friend Tom's going, no, they weren't. And then the third day I went into shock, and I couldn't stop shaking. And I went, I've seen Bigfoot. I swore a bit as well. I've seen Bigfoot. Oh my goodness, I've seen Bigfoot. It was a few more worse language than that. But, I just went into shock. Couldn't believe, I'd seen them. And then I seriously got into looking for them again. So it's until you've seen them, it's like seeing a unicorn in the middle of the road. It is the freakiest thing. Yeah.
Oh, I could imagine. I for me, I would I don't know. I don't think I'd be that excited about it. It would be exciting just to see something so unusual. But now I have to grill you. So you get the impression that you're looking at animals. You're not seeing, is there problem solving? Because you said, well, they can't go this way, so they're back here. But then there's an obstacle here. Do you see problem solving? And are both of them involved in it, or is it just one?
I think Tom was observing them. Tom's seen them loads of times. He's seen Bigfoot well over 40 times. So he was a ranger and a logger, and he's seen loads of them. He said it was an older male with a younger male. No, if that's the case, he said he judged it was an older male teaching younger male hunting, whatever, how to forage. So I would say if that's the case, the younger male is probably taking his cues from the older male and just copying him. I would say, that the one just copied the other. They just followed each other. So,
what was the height?
I said 6.5 and 7. Tom's ex-forces is probably going to be. He's also been in the Navy. He's probably better judge at distance and height than I am. He said 7 and 7.5, but okay. We were, 6 inches out. So yeah.
Okay, but you think these things were definitely black, or you think they were black?
They were black or with dust on them, or they were very dark grey. I think it's so dusty there. I mean, if we walked on that ground, we were covered in dust and our clothing changed colour. So it was likely they were a very, very dark brown or black. So, yeah, with dust on them, I would think. It was incredibly dusty. Our tents were just covered in dust by the end of the holidays. So.
Okay, and as they come back in front of the car, where did they go back to the other side of the road when they left, or?
They basically they ran from the left to the right, then they tried to get cover, then they came back again on the left, and they just ran down this slope. Now, at the time, I think Tom, because he's seen them so many times before, he didn't stop. And I think we were all a bit thrown and a bit shook up from nearly hitting them. So we didn't stop. And it wasn't until, I think it was the next day, we actually came back and looked to see if there were any footprints. But it had been raining anyway, with a little time, not much rain, but that night we did have a little bit. So there wouldn't have been much left anyway. But the slope they ran down, I went to walk down and went, whoa, and had to throw myself back because it was almost sheer. It was, it was like that, and they'd run down it like gazelles. And there's no way I could have even tried to get down it. I wouldn't have been able to get back up. I would have been at risk of breaking my neck. So that in itself, and they ran down it like gazelles, I mean, suggests they were not human, because a human, you get some hill runners who have adapted their muscles to do that, but I really don't think so. I don't think your average human could have done it, especially, if they were in gorilla suits, they definitely couldn't, because people stagger, they can't run, definitely not. So that in itself reinforced that they're definitely not many monkey suits, so gorilla suits.
So when you saw this thing, so you didn't have any real reaction right away, right? You're just trying to, I don't know, let it sink into your psyche as to what you've seen. And so you didn't have any reaction immediately, because what I'm looking for is fear. What was your, because maybe there was some kind of communication, and that's what I'm looking for. So what was your feeling?
It was, my brain was still trying to perceive what I was seeing. So at the time, I was just like not really having an emotional reaction to it. I did, the Sykesville monster. Are you familiar with the image of the Sykesville monster?
No. Oh, maybe. I'm sure I am.
Another radio show host. But if you look at the image of the Sykesville monster, very similar. I think that was constructed from, some of the images of Homo habilis and other things that they've imposed on top of it. But Richard Freeman showed me that. He kept asking me to describe it again and again and again. About every 6 months, he said, "Can you tell me what it looked like again?" And probably a year and a half, 2 years after I'd seen it, he said, "Oh, will you have a look at the Sykesville monster? Let's get it up on the internet." So he showed me this, and I just froze, and I went, "Oh, God." And I felt nauseatingly sick. I felt dizzy. I felt I was back there. It was almost like a delayed shock. And I went, "Oh, that's just like what I saw. The nose isn't quite right. The nose is too primate-like, but that is what I saw, and that was really freaky, actually. That's, yeah.
So, Jackie, did it look like the Todd Standing, that picture he's got? That one where... No, because that one's brown, actually. I
don't believe any of the Todd Standing stuff. I think it's all faked. I'm sorry.
Really? Oh, yeah, I thought it was real.
I think that looks. I know Bill Munns has even said he looks like one of his Chewbacca outfits. He's sort of, he's there's loads of people say. It doesn't even look real. The nose looks like it's made of like some resin or clay. I'm sorry, it doesn't look real. And that thing with it so-called sleeping, I think that's a hydraulic thing under a carpet. I really don't think that's real.
Well, you Brits are a real tough crowd.
Yeah.
Hard to please.
All my friends who are zookeepers, and wildlife people have said that is not a real animal.
Oh, really?
The fur's not even right. It's not hair or fur, it's fake.
Wow. Well, I had me fooled. I thought that was because I thought that he was really the only guy. If you're going to look for Bigfoot, you should just go out like he does and not take all this crap with you and a bunch of people just go sneak through the woods. But, that's interesting.
I might be wrong, but that's my view. We very carefully had a look at those images and, almost everybody now in the cryptozoological world, when they looked at them within minutes, 2 minutes, they said those are fakes. Then they look real. It doesn't even. Yeah, sorry.
Yep. Well, there's one.
You might want to come on and argue with me, but I'm sorry. But
they say there's one born every minute, and I guess my minute was few years ago. Well, okay, so not Todd Standing's thing. So when it looked in your eyes, but it looked in your eyes, right? It looked right at you.
I don't know whether it was looking at me, but it was looking at us in the car, I think.
It looked long enough at you to know that that's a something. It's something you can communicate with. Wow.
I think they were recognizing what we were. I don't know whether they could see us through the reflection of the glass, but you know, they were looking right in our direction, which is quite a weird thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to add, I interviewed a guy I think he's probably 18 or something. And at the time that he had his encounter, he was 13 in the same area. And he said he was walking on a stream, just kind of spacing out. And he looked up and there was a Bigfoot drinking out of the stream. But he said this one was probably about 8 foot tall. And he just walked right up on it and surprised it. And it looked up and then I think it took a drink, like it didn't worry that much about him. And then it walked up a bank or whatever, but in basically the same area. So can I ask you this? Because did you go to the Trees of Mystery I think it's near Klamath. Did you see that thing? I'm just trying to.
I think so. No, I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay. Because I've never been to Willow Creek, and I just want to know how close. I've been to like the Trees of Mystery because we do the coast road, the coast highway, but that's on the coast. So I just wanted to know how close that was to Willow Creek. All right, so that is your Bigfoot encounter, and we don't have a lot of time left, Jackie. So you've seen Bigfoot. And now you started getting involved with researchers. You went with Adam Davies to the Bigfoot tree. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or what's your?
I mean, initially we went out and we sort of camped the location, and Laurie initially took us down to the tree. Now, initially, when I first experienced it, I thought, that's a territorial rodent, because Laurie would, slap on the tree, stamp her foot, and you would get this little tap back. Initially, it was quite a small tap, so I just thought it's a territorial rodent, but I didn't want to upset her, so I just sort of kept quiet. And then the others came back, and Adam and the other there was some zoologists there, came back shaking, and they said, "Oh, Jackie, it's not a rodent, you've got to go." So I went up again with Laurie. And this time it was loud bangs. And at one point we said we were there was some food. We left some food out, and it appeared to have been, the wrapper seemed to be taken off with fingers. Now raccoons can do that as well, but that got us wondering. And then we said we're going to take the food away, and there seemed to be what sounded like a roar, which scared all of us, absolutely terrified us. So we all put the food back, and the roar stopped. Now, it did genuinely sound like there was some creature there. I mean, my theory was it was a bear later on, because I said to Richard Freeman, he said, "What did it sound like?" And I said, "It sounded just like Chewbacca from Star Wars." And he said, "Did you know that was the voice of a black bear?" So I was pretty sure it was a bear. But some of it did seem quite intelligent. And then Laurie sort of let me listen to some recordings where it sounds like a gorilla beating its chest. I wasn't as convinced about that. I thought it could have been a woodpecker in the distance. Didn't have quite the sort of hollow sound. I've stood right next to mountain gorillas beating their chests, and it's quite hollow sound. It didn't sound quite right with that, but I said, it might be, it might not be. And then obviously Brent Dill's. I've kept in touch with Brent and Laurie, and Brent's theory that it's the tree. Now, I was very skeptical because, I had heard the roar, but I've also seen Brent's recordings where it's zooming right in on the tree, and you can see the tree actually moving in time with the bumps. Now, I did do a few tests myself, and I found out a lot of those trees are very hollow. They're all rotted out, so they act like a sound box. So I can see Brent's theory that it could like be the sound of the embedded tree transmitting down. I also saw a blue jay, because like corvids family, they will mimic. I also got a blue jay mimicking me with taps. It was inside a tree, and it sounded very much like the Bigfoot. So, I think people, as Brent said, people can overinterpret stuff. And I think, you can hear a thump and you can presume it's one thing. But, if you're a scientist, you have to see whether you can falsify things. That's one of the principles of science, falsifiability. You see whether you can create that by any of the source. And then if you can't 100% say what you experience is what your hypothesis. So, that could be the case with, it could well be the tree. I'm open-minded. We did find Bigfoot footprints that were very good Bigfoot footprints that definitely weren't faked, because the things you look for, they were definitely real, and they were from a very heavy animal. I jumped off a log and couldn't even get anywhere near the depths, and this thing was probably about 700 pounds, 800 pounds. So I know they're definitely around there. We also got that camera trap photo that's a bit ambiguous, but it could be the back of a Bigfoot right near there. I heard a howl on the last day, and Dave Archer was one of the people who heard the back end of it. So we definitely know they're there. We're pretty sure they're there, but it's, is it, is the tree a Bigfoot? I think, more research has got to be done. I think people have got to be open to research. I think, it's not been helpful, all this arguing over it. I think people need to be open to possibilities. And as in your last interview with Brent, I think we should let people believe what they want to believe. But I think it's really important to try to be objective about this.
Yeah, and it's not, I mean, I don't agree with that 100%. And it's because of what you said, once you start letting people believe what they want to believe, well, then that takes away the credibility of what of the people that are actually doing real research and what it is. I don't know if you saw my video with Brent, but I just went out there, and I grew up in the Northwest, and I think that I'm sure coming from England, you're just in awe of these massive forests and these trees and the broad expanses that are probably bigger than, a lot of regions in your country.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I look at those because I thought, when I first came out with Adam, I thought Bigfoot, 2-3% chance existing. And then I saw the wilderness. I thought, oh my goodness, I can see why it easily could. And that started to put the percentage chance up. And then, by the end of the first trip, I was about 90% convinced it existed. And then 100% after I saw it on the next trip. So, I mean, in England, a lot of our woods, some of these woods that they've been claiming on these programs as Bigfoot, and they're 1.5 miles long. It's laughable. They have nothing to eat, I mean, we've got a few forests, like the New Forest, that's pretty large, but it's nowhere near as big as your forests, I think that's 20 miles across at the most, 18 miles across. We've got a few nice forests in Caledonia, Scotland, but they're nowhere near the size of American forest. Things would be easily be spotted. They probably were, around in medieval times. The Russian almas has also been spotted on the border with Finland in 1980. There was a sighting where a ranger, two tourists, they saw what they described as a troll and were very shook up. And it sounds exactly like the Russian Yeti, the almasty, or almas it's called in Mongolia, but almasty it's called in Russia. But, so I think they probably were in England at some point. But, in America, there's so much, a lot of this place in Northern California as well, in other areas, it's rocks with trees growing on them. And, it rips your boots apart in minutes. So I bought some hiking boots. They were wrecked in 10 minutes. So, humans aren't going to go on those spots, not typically anyway.
Yeah. Well, Jackie, we've been at this for some time, and I promised you I'd let you do it for an hour, and then I would set you free. I just want to ask you, are you familiar with the 411 missing people phenomena?
Yeah, I love his books, and I've met him. He's a really nice guy as well. Very genuine chap. And yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. I read his books, The Hooper Project as well, Tribal Bigfoot, and then he went on to the 411 books. And as in a lot of the initial 411 books, there's a lot of hints about Bigfoot implications, isn't there? There's a lot. And the stuff for the young children, and saying that the big hairy doggy man took me for a walk on his shoulders and fed me with berries with his hands. I mean, you know, what else could it be, you know? And these are proper police reports he's got hold of, and he's an ex-police detective himself, and very professional, you know, he interviews people, proper police interviews under affidavit, and, you know, he uses Hovey Pratt, isn't it, the forensic artist, and it's just the consistency of the sketches is just amazing, you know. But the 411 stuff, you know, it's fascinating. And he's researched in England as well. He's looked at the Manchester pusher, which is somebody who pushes people, they think he's a serial killer who pushes people into the canals, which is something that's been quite a controversial thing in England as well.
That's the best name you could come up with. Yeah,
that's what it's called. Manchester. I think it's the Manchester pusher or something.
Guy selling joints to kids outside of the junior high. Okay, well, all right. I guess things are changing in England. All right. So do you think, because, Thom Cantrall, I asked him, and he says, oh, Bigfoot's not responsible for any of these missing people. Do you agree with that?
I think, early hominids, they used to eat each other. There's evidence of them cannibalizing each other. So I must, I think, I think they're like people. You're going to get friendly ones, you're going to get less friendly ones. I think it's possible, if they come across somebody who's vulnerable and they're hungry, I think there's probably a chance they might well eat them. But I think they're no more dangerous than a bear or a cougar. It's difficult. I mean, they might not have, but they do eat meat. We know they eat meat. I had another encounter. I had rocks thrown at me, and they're pretty good. I think that was interesting. I think the Brooklyn who films, the person who filmed The Summit, me and him went out, and we, had an incident where we went up a logging road that there'd been a very recent sighting that Johnny who runs The Summit told us. We went out on the night of the summit, the Saturday night. This was 2017. And we made the whoops, we made the howls, and we were suddenly, something was either side of us.
Wow.
Initially we got pine cones, little stones, and then we got rocks. The next one got more like rock-like, and we ran. But it's interesting, they seemed to be purposely missing us. So I think they were just trying to scare us off. But I think, I don't know, it's difficult, I can't say, but I think if they are a primitive hominid, we know that there's, archaeological evidence they did used to cannibalize other hominids and sometimes the same species. So, it's possible, but I think it's very important that we don't think, right, they're a scary monster, let's shoot the lot of them, because they're like a cougar, they're a bear, they've got a right to live, they're also possibly related to us. So it's very important, we just be careful around them. I'm very scared by people who take little kids out Bigfoot, because I think there is potential. But I think, you need to be careful. But at the same time, I think, that they are potentially an early man. So I think we need to give them respect and rights as well.
Did you ever do a police sketch or anything on your sighting? Any?
Yeah, I did actually. Yeah, I did. I can actually do art reasonably well. I've done some murals in Exeter, but I was in very left brain mode at the time, because they say you have to transfer on the right side of your brain to draw. So it's not a brilliant sketch, but yeah, I mean, it was very bit similar to the Sykesville monster. If people can look at that, the image I got. Sadly,
Would you share your image?
Sorry.
Would you share your image with us?
Yeah, I can put that on the website. Yeah.
Okay. Well, or I'd sure like to.
Yeah, I haven't got it on me. Yeah, sadly, I've moved house and it's in a sketchbook somewhere.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's sort of people say, why didn't I film it? Well, to start with, unfortunately, that was the charge day for my camcorder and it was at my feet. But to be quite frank, you see something like it, you're not, there was Jeremy Holden, who's a wildlife cameraman who actually saw the orangutan deck walked in front of him. He's like, it's not like orangutan that seems to be in Sumatra that, a lot of people have been interested in as well. It's not a hominid, it seems to be an unknown ape. And he's top cameraman. He dropped his camera. He couldn't film. It was right in front of him. He had loads of time to film. There's quite a famous Gordon Buchanan, who's an English cameraman. You might have seen some of his stuff in America. He's a very famous English wildlife cameraman. He spoke to Jeremy, and he's quite keen on trying himself, but he said, Jeremy, they just couldn't film, And, these are people who make a living of filming stuff that suddenly shoots out of nowhere. And, and I think people who are not in a car as well. This is, a big animal. It's potentially, it's omnivore. It's potentially carnivorous. Especially if you've got kids with you, you're not going to stay around. You're not going to be thinking, let's get a shot. It could eat me, or it could attack me, because they are a wild animal. I mean, mountain gorillas. I've been in mountain gorillas and I went silverback that charged, and it's pretty scary. And they're big; they're really big animals. So, you're not. Most people, they're not going to get these shots, to be quite frank. And they use autofocus camcorders a lot of the time, and they can't cope in trees. You need. And, if you're manually focusing and you're terrified and your hand's shaking, unless you're a top expert is used to working with, animals like bears where your life's under threat as you're getting too close to them, you're not going to get that shot, or very unlikely to get that shot unless you're really lucky. So.
Right. And if you've never seen that before and you're sitting there saying, am I seeing this? Nobody's going to look away to pick up a camera. So,
no.
So that is just amazing. So, Jackie, have you published anything? Is there something we can read of yours?
On YouTube, there's quite a few lectures I've given on there and radio shows. So you can look me up there. I'm mentioned in quite a few books. Richard Freeman's just got a book, Adventures in Cryptozoology, and my accounts, I've written an account for him there, and it goes on for quite a few pages about my account and also the rock throwing incident. So they're in there. I am starting to plan out my own book. So hopefully next couple of years, hopefully that'll come out. But yeah.
All right. Exciting. And what are your plans? So you're going to be speaking somewhere soon?
That's in England, Lytham St Anne's, which is near Blackpool in England. That's at the Lapis conference, and I'm talking about weird Bigfoot there, sort of paranormal stuff. I'm also be talking about, infrasound and all those sort of things around that, and my theories about what's happening. So that will be, slightly different. I normally give lectures, sort of quite sort of zoological based, about Bigfoot, but this will be a different one for me. So, when is your talk?
That
is the first weekend in November. I think it's around the 6th, but it's Lapis, which is LAPIS, capital letters, I think, and that's Lancashire. I can't remember the abbreviation. Lancashire Paranormal and Anomalous Phenomena Society, I think. I can't apologise to Lapis if I can't remember the acronym, but they're an established group. They've been going for years, and they do UFO research. They do paranormal stuff. Their stuff's very interesting. They go all over northern England and even other areas of the country doing research. They're a very good group.
Okay.
And I'm also involved in ASAP, who are very good as well, associated with the study of anomalous phenomena, and that's professors, scientists, all looking at paranormal, cryptozoology, other unusual phenomena. So,
well, great. So lots of podcast guests for me.
Yeah, I've got quite a few lined up for you. So.
Well, I need to get you on here with Ron Moorhead if you're going to be doing your infrasound. You know a lot about that?
I'm researching it, really. I've also looked in that.
Do you know Ron?
I know Ron. Yeah, I don't know him that well, but I know him to talk to. I won't spoil it for the lapis, but I'm researching it, looking at infrasound. There's other animals that have got use infrasound as well. So
okay, like tigers.
Yeah, tigers. Yeah.
See, I've learned a lot in my short. I think I've been doing this podcast for 4 months now. All right. Well, Jackie, I think that we are going to close this off a little bit. So you're going to be busy doing your speaking. You're still doing your researching, and we're going to get you back on here as soon as we can.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I hope to get to the Sasquatch Summit in November in Ocean Shores. I'm hoping anyway. And I've got some possible trips next year. So I can tell you about those then. So
I will see you in Ocean Shores. I'm trying to speak there. Are you speaking?
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
Are you speaking there?
No, I'm not speaking there. No.
I sent a request to let me speak there. So we'll see.
Oh,
but if you're going to go there, I'll definitely see you.
It's a really good conference. If people are into Bigfoot, there's absolutely loads of people there, and there's some really good speakers. It's really good stuff. So yeah.
All right. Have you been to Ocean Shores before?
Yeah, I think.
Did you drive up and down on the beach?
3 times, I think.
Did you drive up and down?
They call me the English lady. That's what Bob Gimlin calls me, the English lady.
Well, that's good.
I'm the only English person there normally, apart from Brooklyn, who films it. He's originally from Bradford in England. But he's now got an American accent.
Okay. Well, I'm glad they tacked the lady on the end. Have you been on the beach at Ocean Shores?
It's amazing, beautiful, yeah.
But do you drive up and down?
I'm trying to think if we.
I'm taking you. I'm going to take you in my 4-wheel drive.
That'd be nice. Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Flying around. Yep.
The tsunami warnings are a little bit disconcerting for me, having been in the Nepal earthquake. I must admit, Nepal earthquake, first time Ocean Shores, so the tsunami warnings. Oh dear, that did not put my confidence up.
Don't worry about that. What we do is we'll chase seagulls and tourists and some of the locals as well. So
that sounds great.
Around in my truck. All right. Well, it's really been fun, Jackie. This interview has gone so fast. I'm sure we've taken up a lot more time than I promised I would. So Jackie Tonks from Devon in jolly old England. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, you have a super day, and thank you for being on the podcast. And I've really learned a lot, and I can't wait to get you back.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jackie. And for everybody out there watching or listening to this podcast, I want you to remember winter is now closing in, so you still might decide to go out into the wilds. And if you are out in the wilds, if it's in the U.S. or the UK, always watch your back. Thanks for listening to tonight's show. Please remember, if you've had an encounter, we want to hear about it. Go ahead and email us at encountersusa1@gmail.com or contact us at encountersusa.com, our website, and go to the contact form. All right, everybody. Until next time, be careful out there. And if you're out in the woods, watch your back.